Welcome to part 8 and the final part of module 6, which is development. Today what we're going to be talking about is Ericksons Stages of Psychosocial Development. Now, this is actually kind of a little bit of a review. Basically, it's going to walk us through all these different stages of life from the very beginnings of life until the very end of life. But it's going to be all through one theory, which is Erickson's theory, obviously. So Erik Erikson basically contended that each stage of life has its own psychosocial task to become a successful, complete person, right? So psychosocial, again, obviously is the kind of the combination of psychological and sociological or psychological and social tasks. So we have these 8 stages. I'm blocking one of them right now with myself. But we have 8 stages that we go through in life, and in each one of these stages, we have this task that we basically need to complete. Now, we're going to see each one, and it'll basically have this versus this, something versus something. And the idea is that you're going to go one of those two directions. You're either going to complete the task, which is obviously the positive side of it, or we aren't. And then each one of these tasks, or each one of these stages, I guess would be a better word, each one of these stages, has effects on us later on in life. So when we complete these tasks effectively, we become a successful and complete person as we go through life. If we don't complete them, it has negative effects for us later on. It's going to cause issues later on in our life. So we kind of just stay there. Now, we could technically go through and maybe fix some of these later on in life, but generally he's going to focus on it in these different stages. Again, at the end, it's going to be our ability to kind of feel confident in the ability to function in the world. This is what these stages are about, our ability to function when we get into the real world. So each one is going to look pretty much like this. I basically will have the actual stage, the two sides of what's going on, or the verses that's happening. We'll talk a little bit about it. It'll have a major question, right? This question is, again, what we are answering. What's the problem that we're having? It's also going to have a basic virtue with it, and it's going to have important events as well. So usually these events are connected with, or I don't want to say triggering, but are connected with our ability to solve this problem, basically. So our very first stage is trust versus mistrust. Trust versus mistrust. This is obviously happening in infancy. So infants must learn that adults can be trusted. That is the idea of this section. That's what needs to happen. Now, the major question is, can I trust the people around me? Our basic virtue is hope, and the important events are feeding. So again, obviously, one of the most important things for infants to do is be fed, and be fed when they're hungry, and cared for, obviously. So during this time, the idea is that these infants will learn to either trust the people around them, their parents in most cases, to care for them, or not to. Now, again, the idea is that whichever way they go on this, it will affect them later on in life. Obviously, trust is the correct solution to this question. Our next stage is anatomy versus shame or doubt. Anatomy versus shame or doubt. This one's going to refer to toddlers. So as toddlers begin to explore their world, they learn that they can control their actions and act on their environment to get results. So they start, and if you've ever been around a toddler, that's why they run around and they open things and they want to unzip stuff and they pick stuff up and they throw it, right? Those are all things that toddlers do. Main question, or the major question, sorry. Can I do things myself, or am I reliant on the help of others? Our basic virtue is will, and the important events, or one of the most important events, is toilet training. When I learn to be potty trained, I'm learning that I am in control of myself, I am in control of my environment, and obviously that gives me autonomy because I can do things. If I don't learn that, I basically am reliant, right? I feel shameful, I doubt myself as I go on in my life. Our next stage is initiative versus guilt. At preschool stage, children are capable of initiating activities and asserting control over their world through social interactions and play. Again, this one is pretty similar to autonomy versus shame and doubt, except for now we've kind of adding in a little more of a social aspect than our first one. Our major question, Am I good or bad? Our basic virtue is purpose, and our important events are exploration and play. Now, again, the idea here is what we're learning is the answer to that question. Am I good or bad? So when I do things, do I get in trouble, or do I do things that are good? Am I positively reinforced? Am I told that even when I get in trouble, I'm not a bad person because I got in trouble, but maybe I just did something wrong, right? But we create this basically idea of ourselves, this idea of am I as an individual, right, as a person, good or bad. The next stage is competence versus inferiority. Children begin to compare themselves to their peers, develop a sense of pride and accomplishment, or feeling of inferiority or inadequacy. So now our question, this one's a little tricky because it's very similar. Instead of am I good or bad, it's how can I be good? Our virtue is competence, and our important events are schools. Now again, what's happening here is this is elementary school generally. So these children, now that they're with each other, start to compare themselves. They start to notice other kids' grades. They start to notice other kids who get maybe more or less attention. They start to notice other people getting more or less praise. They start to notice physical abilities. So through this, will they develop a sense of being competent, being able to be successful, being able to accomplish different things? Or will they develop this sense of inferiority, this feeling that they are unable, they're inadequate, they're inferior to other people? Our next stage is identity versus role confusion. So this is getting adolescent. We already actually talked about this a little bit. So an adolescent's main task is develop a sense of self. So the main question is, who am I? Our basic virtue is fidelity, and our important events are social relationships. So we already talked about this when we talked about adolescence directly, but the idea here is that adolescents, and this is middle through high school, and maybe a little bit after high school, are trying to figure out who they are. What am I as a person? What are my interests? What makes me me? What makes me similar to people? What makes me different to people from other people? Just trying to answer that question and figure out who they are. Again, this is why also a really big thing that happens in adolescence is a lot of people are trying to figure out what are they going to do with their life. What kind of career are they going to have? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to join the military? Are they going to go directly into some sort of job? Right? All of those are part of this trying to figure out of who they are. Who am I? Our next stage is intimacy versus isolation. What's happening here is we're looking for the development and maintenance of successful relationships. So again, this is going to be happening in like early, maybe emerging in early adulthood, where we're looking to now create relationships. Now, one thing that's important here is it says successful relationships with others. Now, this does not necessarily mean that you find someone, get married, have kids immediately in this time period. It just means that these relationships are successful, that we feel like they are successful. So even if they don't necessarily last forever, we feel like they are positive, good relationships with other people. So the major question is, will I be loved or will I be alone? The basic virtue is love, and the important events are romantic relationships. So as we start to figure out who we are, then we start looking for somebody else to be with us. And this kind of question of, will I find someone to be with? Will I find love? Or will I be alone? Again, the important thing here isn't necessarily the fact that you have to get married or something like that. But it's just the belief that you will be loved, right? As opposed to the belief that you're going to end up alone forever. Those are kind of the two sides, as opposed to I have to get married in this stage no matter what. Our next stage is generativity versus stagnation. So here we're going to get into middle age. So middle-aged adults begin contributing to the next generation, society, or have little connection to others. So again, the idea here is that as we get into middle age, right, usually this is where we're going to start having children, or we're already raising our children. or if we don't have children, we start looking for a purpose that's kind of bigger than ourselves, right? We're starting to look for things that are going beyond us. So for a lot of people, that's kids, right? Their kids are what they are going to give to the world, what they're giving to the next generation. Our major question here is, how can I contribute to the world? Our basic virtue is care, and our important events are parenthood and work. Now again, for many people, parenthood and having children and raising children is, the way that they answer this question, but it doesn't have to be. You can definitely get through and have this generative trait without having kids. What you would do is you would find that contribution somewhere else. So maybe that contribution is through work. So like as a teacher, obviously, a lot of teachers find that they feel they are contributing to the world, contributing to the next generation by teaching, right? By doing the things that they do. So I can do that through work. I can do it through volunteering. I can do it through a million other avenues. Parenthood just tends to be one of the bigger ones. And obviously stagnation is this idea that we're just kind of staying the same. We're not doing anything extra. We're not adding anything. Our next stage is ego, integrity versus despair. Ego, integrity versus despair. So people late in adulthood reflect on their lives and feel either a sense of satisfaction or a sense of failure. Now again, this is the end of our lives here. So generally speaking, we're going to be elderly and we're looking back now. And we are kind of basically looking back and thinking about our life. Our major question is, did I live a meaningful life? Our basic virtue is wisdom, and our important events are exactly what it sounds like, reflecting back on our lives. So the idea is at the end of my life, not necessarily like I'm going to die tomorrow or anything like that, but as when I'm an elderly person, I know I'm getting towards the end of my life. When I look back on it, do I feel a sense of satisfaction? Do I feel like the life I lived was good and worth it and productive and meaningful? Or do I feel like I failed? Do I feel like there were things that I should have done that I didn't do, or I could have done things better? That's kind of the big question. So this is we're just gonna watch this in class. We'll talk about it, but we're gonna listen to the song 7 Years by Lucas Graham, and we'll kind of connect a lot of what he's saying to these different stages, and you'll actually see they tie very, very well together. So that's something we'll just do during class there. So again, take a few moments, go through and do a quick reflection of all of Erickson's stages of psychosocial development, and that'll wrap up this unit.